among those, among those, among those. Today is the third opportunity I've had to speak at Sunday gatherings here. Just as a little review, the first Sunday I spoke about how we listen to the Dharma, and the three main points of listening to the Dharma are: we listen as if today is the first time we're hearing the Dharma, we listen as if today is perhaps the last time we'll have the opportunity to hear the Dharma, and third, we listen as if the teachings are for me alone. The second Sunday that I spoke here, I discussed the essence of Shin Buddhism in a few simple words, and that is the teaching of showing us our ego self and of going beyond our ego self. Today, I would like to talk about how we encounter the Dharma, how we encounter the Dharma. And of course, there's many ways to encounter the Dharma. Maybe you happen to read a book for the first time about Buddhism, and that's how you encounter the Dharma. Maybe a traumatic or tragic experience in life starts you on a spiritual path, and then you encounter the Dharma perhaps that way. But today I'd like to talk about how we encounter the Dharma by meeting people who live the Dharma. So meeting the Dharma means to meet people who embody the Dharma, who are living the Dharma, whose lives are fulfilled by the Dharma. And I'd like to just share some individuals that I have encountered over the course of my life who have inspired and shown me what is the life of Buddhism. And the first person I'd like to mention is my grandfather. My grandfather was first generation Japanese, and so he didn't speak hardly any English. And growing up, I didn't speak hardly any Japanese. So of course there was a little gap there between my grandparents and myself. I always respected them, but I could never talk with them, directly. But when I would see my grandfather at a service, when he would come in front of the statue of the Buddha to do Oshoko, there was something deep and very powerful about my grandfather's Nembutsu, as if it came from the very core of his being. So deep, hard to describe, so deep, such a kind of a powerful, deep feeling. And I'm just a little kid, and when I do Oshoko, you do it quick and you just bow, and not much to my Nembutsu at that time. And even to this day, I feel that in my life I will never equate the depth of Nembutsu that my grandfather had. Of course, my grandfather never studied Buddhism like I did in college and graduate school, and so he never had any academic background in Buddhism or Jodo Shinshu, but from a very sort of simple, his own conviction, I will never equate my grandfather. So he's someone that I always keep in the back of my mind in terms of living the life of the Nembutsu. The second person I want to mention is the teacher that we had at the Institute of Buddhist Studies, Reverend Kusada. Reverend Kusada is a tiny man, maybe barely 5 feet tall, maybe, 110 pounds, maybe something like that. Tiny man. But he was the first person who showed me the real life of humility. He was such a humble man, such a humble man. Even when he drove in traffic, he used to bow to people. He was a scariest driver to ride with, believe me. And he had all kinds of little dents on his car, and he was from Japan. But when Reverend Kusada would drive, sometimes he would not notice another car or something, and another car would come screeching to a stop, and then Reverend Kusada would bow his head and do one-hand gasho, one hand on the steering wheel, and he would bow, one-hand gasho. Simasen, simasen. He was apologizing through his motions to the other driver. He was very humble, but very, very, very dynamic and very powerful in the way he lived Nembutsu. He was also a master of many things. He was master at tea ceremony. He was a master at sutra chanting. I didn't realize it till I went to Japan. He was like one of the most accomplished ministers in sutra chanting, because I had teachers like that in Japan, but actually none of them equaled the level of Reverend Kusada. And he was also, I don't know how many degree black belt in Aikido. And every once in a while he would be asked to give an Aikido demonstration. So one time he said, I need someone to help me for this Aikido demonstration. Actually, he needed like a body to throw around, you know. So he's demonstrating how you use this stick in Aikido, and if someone comes at you, you know, they grab the stick, what you do, and so he's doing this demonstration, and we're practicing. And so he's flipping me around, almost like at will. And then Reverend Kusada said, don't fall down so easy. Sensei, I'm not trying to fall down easy. He was just flipping me all over the place. He was such a master at Aikido. And I took high school wrestling. I thought I was pretty strong, but he was really amazing. But such a humble man of living the Nembutsu. The third individual I want to talk about is Reverend Gyome Kubose, who was a minister of the Buddhist Temple of Chicago. Now, Reverend Kubose was not a BCA minister or Nishihonganji minister. He was ordained through the Higashi tradition, and he's the author of the book Everyday Suchness. For our discussion class, we're going to read from his book Everyday Suchness today. And I heard Reverend Kubose give a talk at the San Jose Temple when I was going to the Institute of Buddhist Studies. And I had been struggling with trying to understand Jodo Shinshu. I really connected with Buddhism in general, but I was just having a hard time trying to understand Jodo Shinshu as the way it was being explained to me in my classes at IBS. But when I listened to Reverend Kubose, he talked about Jodo Shinshu in a strikingly different manner. He says, you know, Amida Buddha symbolizes that which we should become. That was so different from what I've ever heard. Amida Buddha represents that which we should become. In other words, immeasurable life and immeasurable light. So I was so drawn to Reverend Kubose's way of expressing Shin Buddhism that after I finished IBS, I thought, this is a teacher I should study under. So kind of brazenly, I called him on the phone and I said, I would really like to study under you. Would it be okay? And he said, well, we don't have a place to live here at the temple. I said, no. My wife has an uncle, widowed uncle. He says we can live with him. So we have housing. And so Sensei said, okay, please come. So we moved to Chicago, and I spent 9 months in Chicago studying under Reverend Kubose. It was 9 months, some of the best 9 months of my life. And in Chicago, those of you that ever lived in Chicago, during the wintertime, you hardly ever see the sun. It is so gloomy, and it's freezing cold, and it snows, and everyone looks kind of pale. But Reverend Kubose, I'm studying with him about Buddhism. We're studying the Sambutsuge, and in the Sambutsuge, it's talking about a truth seeker by the name of Dharmakara who meets a Buddha. And he's so inspired by this Buddha. And this Buddha is so radiant, so shining. And before I used to read this text, I go, what is this talking about? But I'm studying with Reverend Kubose. He's talking about the Dharma. And I see this radiance. Oh, that's what this sutra is talking about. I'm seeing what is being described in the Sambutsuge. So the teachings really came alive when I was able to meet people like Reverend Gyome Kubose. After going to Japan and studying, there's other wonderful teachers I could share, but I want to talk about after becoming a minister, now the people that I've encountered that have really taught me about Nembutsu and the Shin Buddhist way of life. And I want to talk about one individual that I wrote about in my book. This is a book of my essays I put together. to commemorate my 25th year of being a minister. And I want to talk about one of our members that we lost some years ago. And I want to talk about our wonderful member, Scott Morris. Scott and his family have been coming to our temple for some time. And then, unfortunately, he came down with the illness, Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. This is such a sad and tragic illness because there's absolutely no cure. The best you can hope for if you get Lou Gehrig's disease is that maybe it's a slow developing Lou Gehrig's disease. Maybe you might be able to live 10 years, maybe even 20 years. But if it's a fast developing Lou Gehrig's disease, maybe you might only live 2 or 3 years. So he got Lou Gehrig's disease. And we started at our temple what we called Living Through Illness. It's a support group. And once a month, people that have serious illness or someone in their family has a serious illness, we have a little discussion. And so Scott was coming to and his wife, they were coming to our Living Through Illness sessions. And one day Scott was saying, gee, it's really sad. I've been feeling very sad because I've been thinking about all that I'm going to miss in life. He had 2 young children. I'm probably not going to live long enough to see my son graduate from high school. I'm probably not going to live long enough to walk my daughter down the aisle of her wedding day someday. And he was feeling very, very sad about all this. So I thought, what can I say to Scott to help him? So I said, well, Scott, at that time he could still type and write. So I said, Scott, why don't you write a letter? Write a letter to your son that you want him to read when he graduates from high school. You can write it now, give it to your wife. She can share it with your son when he graduates. Write a letter to your daughter that you want her to read on her wedding day. So I thought maybe this would help him to write something. A month later, we had another Living Through Illness session, and the first thing Scott says, Sensei, I wrote something. So I thought he had written one of those letters. But instead, he passed out a piece of paper, and written on it was a short poem. And this is a poem that Scott wrote. So let me explain a little bit about Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a debilitating disease that starts from your feet and your legs, and it works up throughout your body. So it gets to where first you can't walk, and then you lose the capacity of your hands and arms. Then you lose your speech, and it takes your life when you can no longer breathe. So it works its way up. And so Scott composed this poem. I have ALS, and I am grateful. I am grateful to retire early to be with my family. I am grateful I have family and friends that are so supportive and hopeful. I am grateful I can still walk and get around. When that is gone, I am grateful I can still use my hands to feed myself. When that is gone, I am grateful I can still breathe and laugh and feel. When that is gone, I am grateful I had a wonderful life. And when that is gone, Namu Amida Butsu. Such a tremendous poem by Scott Morris. I put this poem up there with all the great myokoning that we have in our Shin Buddhist tradition. To be able to say you have this terminal illness and to still be grateful, that's an amazing thing. Only someone, I think, that has encountered the Buddha Dharma perhaps is able to live that kind of life. And in that short amount of time that Scott had been coming, he came to encounter the Nembutsu, Namu Amida Butsu, not just as a word that we say, not just as a recitation, but as a deep and profound truth, something that transcends his own physical life. That's why even when his life comes to an end, then there is still Namu Amida Butsu. There's this truth of Namu Amida Butsu. He becomes one with that truth, and he continues to be one with his family through the truth of the Nembutsu Namo Amida Butsu. These are some of the individuals that I have encountered over my life as a student and as a minister. I hope that you too will encounter wonderful individuals that show you what it means to live Buddhism, that show you what it means to live the life of Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.